Hello.
Hey, we're doing this podcast in the middle of Wilder's nap.
So be prepared.
You may never even know that we left the building, that Sammy left the building.
But I left the building.
But
Okay.
it's probably going to happen.
So today we're going to get a little real talk going.
Real talk.
Keeping it fresh
Yeah, freshy fresh.
for Rizzle.
Yeah, on the low
No,
dizzle.
no, don't start. It gets so bad, you guys.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's terrible.
We wanted to do like a little life, marriage, season, baby life update.
Here's why. I think it's fun, you guys realizing how not perfect we are.
Do you believe that everyone thinks we're perfect?
I've actually had people that think we just don't have problems and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
I've heard like a few of like people that are like, oh, they just have it all together. It's like,
And
nope,
you're right.
Nope. Wrong. Wrong-o.
Yeah.
But I think just kind of exposing you to some of our life and hopefully having like a humble admission of what's going on in our lives, but also the way that I think we've been able to maintain a certain level of connection. The topic is really like how to maintain connection in the midst of really hard things. And for us, hard things have been having a child that is not just, from what I've heard, he is, okay, maybe you can describe it better, but like high sensory, high.
I can do it.
Why don't you help me?
I don't want to put a label on my child, and I wouldn't put
Sure.
a label on any child. So like, hear me say, this is my way to explain and make sense of some of my life with Wilder.
The pain.
And so I'm going to like create a label, but I don't think it has to be like a judgment or like a part of who he is.
But like, this isn't going to be a conversation we have with Wilder. Hey, the first years of your life, you were a highly sensitive child.
But we'll have real talk about it too, because it's just life. But
Yeah.
I would call Wilder a high needs baby.
Right.
Or a highly sensitive baby. And there is a lot that goes into that, but with babies specifically that are really high needs, a lot of the times it shows up in their sleep. And for Wilder, sleep has been very difficult. For us, sleep has been very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Now, let me preface this with saying I'm anti-sleep training. I probably at some point could have left him in the room alone at night crying, and maybe things would be different, but I was unwilling to do that. And I'm still unwilling to do that, even though I've gotten very, very desperate. And even though I have explored a lot of options, but he has a tendency to wake up like every 30 to 60 minutes. He wants to be on the boob all night long. And even whenever he's getting milk and comforted and getting pat and walked around the room, we have a lot of split nights, which is like he's up for 3 hours in the middle of the night just hanging out.
I mean, the other night it was almost 10 p.m. until 3 a.m. Mm-hmm. And you have a lot of nights you're up, but like the nights that I'm up, I know like even my watch tracks me doing like 10,000 steps around the room to get this kid back to sleep. And
a lot of our efforts on nights like that don't actually work. He has to have a full awake window before he goes back to sleep.
Yeah.
And so I'd say that he's a highly sensitive child, and I'm okay with that. And I will support him in that and embrace him in that. And I have a lot of compassion for that, because I too was a highly sensitive child in my own ways. And so was Spencer. And I have a lot of, even as an adult, have very big sensory issues, and I get overstimulated and busy, crowded places, loud noises, like whistling. Like if Spencer whistles too close to me, I cannot tell you the amount of, intensity. I can feel it and hear it in my whole body.
Yeah. Or
if I'm touched a certain way, like Spencer will be so sweet and he'll try to rub me. But if it's not like a very specific kind of rub or kind of tickling, it bothers me and it's like uncomfortable for me because I can feel it too much. And so I have like a lot of sensory stuff, and so does Spencer. And so it's no surprise that Wilder has that too.
Yeah.
On top of the fact that he had a traumatic birth.
Yeah.
We were separated for the first hours of his life, and we've had to do a lot of recovering from that.
Yeah, big time.
And so all that to say, being sleep deprived for going on 20 months now has been really, really, really brutal.
Yeah.
Like our days with him are so sweet, and there are like the highs are high and the lows are low. Like during the day, he's so much fun. He's such a dream. I love being a mom. We love being parents. He makes life so much better and so much more fulfilling. And I was kind of thinking about this because it's hard being honest about motherhood because I don't want it to come off negative.
Yeah.
And I don't want to scare people away from becoming a parent because it is the most beautiful decision I believe you could ever make.
Yeah.
And it requires so much of you, and it really does require sacrifice. And
the best things in life cost us the most, though.
Yeah. And it's,
I would say the same thing about entrepreneurship.
Right.
It's like, it's not all it's not all like highs when you're starting a business. It's like to make good money, to go after an idea, to risk yourself, to risk your paycheck. I mean, all those different things.
It costs you a lot.
It costs a lot, but it has big reward and big payout. And I would say motherhood, fatherhood, parenting is one of those things.
It's been the best. It's so beautiful. And he makes life on a daily basis so much more fun and fulfilling. And I've heard it's hardest going from having no kids to one because it's such a big transition.
Right.
I've heard from other people going from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. Like those are all easier transitions because your life has already shifted so much.
Sure.
And so I'm sure that there would be like normal challenges we would face. But I would say like I love our life on the nights that I sleep because I actually have capacity to show up and I have energy and I can parent the way that I want to. And life just feels like it's glistening with hope when I'm sleeping, but I've been so sleep deprived.
Yeah.
And so this is like me letting you guys into the amount of sleep deprivation that I and we have gone through has been really, really hard on our connection.
Yeah.
I was going to say marriage, and then it started sounding like carriage.
Oh, carriage. Yeah, totally. Our carriages. Yeah. That's it. Horse carriage.
Wow.
No, on our marriage. Yeah. I would say, our connection to ourselves, connection to God, connection with each other.
Yeah.
Has been really effective. We've had to navigate that in a different way. Cause you used to say this, like back in the day, you'd spend 4 hours just praying on your floor and would have encounters all the time, all day, every day. And it's like, oh wait, now I have a business, a husband and a baby, and I'm sleep deprived and all these different things. It's like, I think assessing capacity with all of this is very difficult. And there's so many different times we still have responsibilities don't end and capacity does. Mm-hmm. And then you go, oh, I guess I do have extra capacity. But it's been a challenging season that has caused me to have to find new ways to connect to myself, to connect to a capacity that's greater than myself.
Yeah.
And I've noticed one of the big things that I've had to work through, because I have a tendency to just feel the weight of responsibility where I'm just like, okay, I have to do this. I have to do this. I have to do this. And then all of a sudden all my have tos and shoulds, that are contributing to me being a good husband. This is what a good husband would do. This is a good leader would do this. If I'm faithful to my business and the things that I'm doing, it's just like the responsibilities stack on good sounding things, but it quickly turns into toil because I'm getting my identity needs met, my, some of that validation and approval met by the things I do. And also I'm so scared of guilt and the condemnation or shame I'll feel by not owning my responsibilities. Yeah. And it's been hard going, what's in my heart to do? Because that was one of my challenges from one of our counselors is like, actually, Spencer, I want you to move away from those things. I want you to start asking the question of what's in your heart to do. And that's scary when I know that there are going to be moments I'll let you down, or I'll let Wilder down, or I'll let the businesses down. But also, I want to do those things with a full heart. And I don't always, but I've noticed the more that I prioritize getting my heart full and asking the question, what's in my heart to do? Not like your fleshly desires, like those things that are surface level that you think are the things that are desires of your heart that actually aren't. It's like, no, your true self, true heart desires. What are those things? Like, what's in your heart to do? And for me, it could be sitting still for a moment for 10 minutes. It could be going out and doing a quick surf session at some point during the week. It's not like I'm going right now and it has to be right now. It's like, hey, it's in my heart to have a surf session. I need to make it happen this week. and that's a reasonable thing to talk about between you and me.
Yeah.
Getting a workout daily doesn't happen every day, but I'm like, okay, it's in my heart to do in this season.
Yeah.
And some of those things are really important. It's not just self-care. It's going, what does my heart need that actually feels like self-care? That's a reasonable expectation that we can discuss as a couple. And as I've noticed that as my heart is fuller and fuller, my ability to pursue you, love you is greater. One thing that I've had to do that's been very difficult is learning to own my sexual desires, own those as my need for intimacy, and being able to point that intimacy towards God or towards, Steve Petermeyer, which would be like a spiritual father of mine. But
that sounds true. So weird. Help.
Steve Petermeyer is like a spiritual father of mine. He's somebody that's come in.
Okay, but
oh, you mean the sexual part of it? Oh yeah, I guess the sexual needs. Yeah. Good old Steve. I'm just kidding.
He is a father in more ways than one.
Oh my gosh, that's terrible.
That sounded weird.
So sexual desires are actually emotional desires, right? It's actually an emotional need. So at the core root of a sexual need, like eunuchs, they still have their needs met, even though they don't have functioning reproductive systems, right?
What is a eunuch?
A monk that that gets his genitalia cut off. Yeah. So they used to have those back in the day, and they were just they dedicated themselves to the Lord. Now I would say they would be like priests that are celibate, and we know how that works in the Catholic Church. Doesn't always work out. Causes deeper problems. But there are people that have made themselves celibate, that have dedicated themselves to the Lord, that are like, I don't want or need sex the rest of my life. So does that mean they don't get their needs met? No. What that means is their needs are converted into purely spiritual and emotional needs being met. And they're actually going, I am foregoing the need for sexual desires to be met.
Right.
And then there's a way to be healthy in that. I think, some people will be like, no, you are a sexual being. It's like, well, yeah, that's true. But also, we are extremely adaptive human beings, and God made us to be fully satisfied and fulfilled in Him. And so I think in this season, there's an invitation for that for me, realizing that I am at the mercy of your capacity with a way that we can come together.
Which, I want to give context for this. Let's dive into the postpartum sex part 2. If you haven't heard our postpartum sex first podcast we did, you can go back to probably... the end of 2022.
You'll find it. Just search the list.
The end of 2022 or the beginning of 2023, we have a postpartum sex podcast.
Yeah.
And I would say, I don't even remember what sex was like at that point in time, but sex has still felt very hit or miss for us in the last almost 2 years now, because Wilder's 20 months, he'll be 4 months from now, which feels wild. And before having a baby, you guys, we were having sex I kid you not, sometimes 3 times a day.
Yeah, but usually once a day.
Yes, but there were
occasions where it's 2 or 3 times a day.
Multiple times a week usually. It was insane. It was a very frequent amount, and
we were having a lot of sex. Yeah.
But it was also it wasn't just quickie sex. It wasn't emotionally disconnected sex. It wasn't just trying to get off. It was us really trying to know each other, learn each other, cultivate intimacy. It was all about connection, oneness, and intimacy.
Yeah.
And it was a really, really beautiful season. And it was beautiful for me learning how to surrender, learning how to let down walls, let down protectors, let love in, be seen, be known. So we had a very beautiful marriage and sexual relationship. And then having a baby definitely threw a huge wrench in that. We're sleep deprived. I'm being touched all day long. I'm nursing my baby on demand. So sometimes that's every 20 or 30 minutes. In the beginning, I was nursing him for an hour at a time,
Well, and I fell in love with you more deeply, but I didn't have those same, needs being met by the baby, with my body.
Yeah.
So it's I had all this desire for you that it was well, you are busy.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you saw me in an entirely new light.
Yeah. I got to experience your nurture, compassion, your motherhood.
Yeah. Just moving from being a woman to a mother and feeling all that nurture, Spencer's eyes were lit up 24/7 around me. And it was 6 months where Spencer felt really happy and fulfilled enough to just keep pouring out love and supporting me and laying down sexual needs, sexual desires. And let me give more context is we are anti-pornography. We've had a history. Spencer's had a history. It's too good. He's had a
history of pornography.
I am so dyslexic, you guys. We just have to keep these in
Verbally.
Because there's so many mess ups. So he had a history with pornography, and some of that entered into our marriage in different seasons. And we had to clean up and work through a lot of pain and figure out how to, I mean, you had to figure out how to get your sexual needs met in a healthy way.
Yeah.
You had to break dissociation. And there's way more history. Maybe at some point we'll talk about that journey whenever you're ready to. But
Sure.
There was a long process that we went through, but long story short, pornography is a no-no. And most of the time, masturbation is a no-no. So it's not like Spencer has other outlets, because for me, unless it's in a very specific context, it kind of feels like that is meant for sex. It's meant for us. Now, if I was not willing to meet your sexual needs, then that doesn't feel fair to me to be like, you don't have any outlet. But we do it in the context of like, this can be with us together.
But the challenge still to me is there a way to have this heart need met, not just running immediately to the sexual outlet? So
that's the journey that you've been on, is like, how do I not just sexualize these emotional needs and think that I need to have this physical release? But if we go back, like in the first 6 months, I had to give some context. In the first 6 months postpartum, Spencer was just laying his life down to love and serve me and Wilder. Mm-hmm. And I think after that 6 month period, with me still being so exhausted and feeling so sleep deprived and feeling like I didn't have love to give, and I didn't want to have sex, and I didn't want to have like connection in general. Like it felt hard to desire connection in general because I was so exhausted.
And touched out.
Just touched out. And that was really hard for Spencer, because I was always the one for the first several years of our marriage initiating sex and doing a lot of work to create intimacy in our life and really good connection. And now all of a sudden, I want nothing to do with it. And Spencer has laid down his need for so long and really like devoted his life to loving us. And now here he is with a wife who doesn't want connection. And so there was a long season where you had to work through rejection and not feeling wanted, not feeling like I cared about you in the same way, not feeling like I loved you in different ways. Like
I think if I could put a summary though on all of it, it's that we experience pain season by season. This happens to be a season where there was a lot of pain for both of us. I think just naturally because of the circumstances, and it definitely probably surfaced things, but I think it's almost so natural to blame your spouse for needs not getting met.
Yeah.
And I think at times, like even after that season, I was just like, it's hard not to blame you for my rejection feelings, abandonment feelings, me not feeling loved. And it's like, I can see rationally what's happening with the baby, and I can hear rationally what you're feeling, but still it's like, there's this thing in my heart that goes, yeah, but do you not want me? Is this not life-giving to you? Why is sex not life-giving to you? It's life-giving to me. Yeah. Why is connection not life-giving to you with me? It's like, there must be something that's wrong here. Or maybe I'm not desirable. And it's like those things swirl around, and it creates wedges, I think, in connection too. And it's hard to feel like we're facing pain together in those moments. And it's hard not to go, you're the reason for aspects of this pain. Yeah. It's like, I can see that maybe 50% or 70% from these circumstances, but, and then that blame starts to come in, whether it's subtle or large, where we blame the other person. And I think one of the greatest things we've done over the last 2 years almost is learning to take ownership for blame and going, okay, I could be doing this alone with a baby. I could be doing this season alone. I could be doing all of this alone. And it would be just as hard, if not harder. And now I have a person that I can release expectation from and recognize that their love that they do have to bring is a gift. And that's very difficult. It's also very difficult to hold that stance and also communicate pain, because you don't want to have that stance and be like, well, I'm never going to share a need now.
Right.
It's like, no, how can I share my needs without having a tight grip on them responding or meeting me a certain way?
And I'll just say too, like, if we didn't communicate, if we weren't fully devoted and committed in our marriage, we would choose to not communicate. But because we are so in it for the long haul, we both know if there's stuff happening under the surface, I have to let you in.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try my best to process through it enough to where it doesn't come out in blame and accusation. But what happens when we don't feel safe enough to communicate, or we choose to not communicate and bring that vulnerability and connection, is space. It starts creating more and more space and division, which perpetuates disconnection, and it's harder to get back to a place of true union and connection.
It kind of manifests as like, I feel so alone in all of this pain.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, whoa. So that's how it manifests. It's like,
or
I'm alone in this.
Or you don't love me.
Yes.
You don't love me, or you don't care, or what it can manifest in a lot of different ways is my point. But I think that there were so many hard ups and downs that we've gone through, because there have been really high highs too. Like hear
100%.
us when we say, like, life is so beautiful and so epic. And part of the reason why, like, having a child is so hard is because you care so much and you don't want to do things wrong. Like, I know the tension I feel of wanting to do this well is very stressful at different times, because I want to love him well. I want to love my husband well. Like, I want to give our baby, like, the attachment and connection he needs. I want to give my husband secure attachment and connection that he needs. And yet I feel depleted and not capable of loving them well sometimes.
Well, I think that's why a lot of people really are avoidant of having children. It's like, I've never had my needs met as a child. How am I supposed to give you what you need? That just feels like an impossible responsibility. That's going to weigh on me, and I'll never be free from it. It feels like a trapped feeling, the thought of having children.
Totally. Yeah. And it makes sense. And I think that that's why parenthood has been easy in the ways that it has, because of the amount of work and intention we put into healing and becoming emotionally available. Because even whenever I am so depleted, I still have enough to pour in love to my baby and to my husband. But if I backtrack to what I was saying, like, there have been high highs and low lows, but in this postpartum season, I think what's been really beautiful is nothing has felt super high stakes or detrimental in our marriage or our connection.
Right.
It's been really hard in different moments, but our level of connection sits so much higher than it ever has, because of our ability to work through pain together. And our ability to communicate and let each other in and be seen and known and bring that vulnerability. Like, it really has, as we've fluctuated through different things that are coming up and different hard elements of this season with having a toddler, like, we are constantly still growing closer together and letting each other in and having the hard conversations of, like, here's what I'm believing right now. Or, like, in the season where Spencer was feeling like rejected by me and like I didn't love him, it was so hard because I'm already so depleted. And I'm like, can you not see everything that I'm giving to our child? Do you not see that I'm the one that's up with him most of the time at nighttime? Can you not see that he's touching me and needing me constantly? And now the person that I love and want to be connected to, now I'm having to have hard conversations, clean up messes, remind you that I love you, remind you of this season, remind you that I am committed to you. And then still I'm trying to go above and beyond when I already don't feel like I have it in me to express love in the ways I'm able, which takes more energy. But it's like, it's hard. It's a cocktail.
I think the most difficult part about all of it was it's so hard not trying to compare your pain, because your pain was so different and so hard than my pain. But
this is probably the biggest struggle for us.
This was the biggest point of contention, because it's like, hey, I'm feeling this stuff. And it's like, okay, well, I'm feeling all of this stuff. Oh, so are you saying my stuff isn't as bad as yours? Is kind of the underlying message that each one of us got. And it's because we didn't have capacity in those moments to validate or see the other person because we were so lost in our own pain. And then it exacerbated everything because we're like, fine, you just think your pain is the most important thing. And that's kind of how we would walk away from some of those very triggered moments.
Well, it'd be
and
like,
come back together and go, oh, that's not what was going on. We got to work through the triggers. And
Spencer would want to connect with me, and he'd talk about, you know, how, and this is just like a brief, not accurate summary, but he'd talk about how stressed he was at work and how tired he was. And that was the one that always got me, when he would tell me how tired he was. And there are definitely nights where Spencer is very helpful and can be helpful, but there are a lot of nights where Wilder just wants me, and a lot of nights where I'm soothing Wilder before Spencer ever wakes up. And so hearing that he's tired, I just want to be like, you're tired? No, I'm tired. Do you not, like, just the rage of hearing him complain, which just shows that I don't have capacity to hold space or have compassion for him because I'm in too much of my own pain.
Yeah.
And so he would talk about how tired he was and how hard work was, how stressed out he was. And I would just sit there listening, rolling my eyes in my head, because I'm thinking, you get to sit in a room alone talking to adults and have personal time and space. You get to go to the bathroom when you want, and then eat when you want, and get a workout in the middle of your day. Right. I'm constantly being spread thin and pulled in every direction. And even when my baby's sleeping, I don't get a break because I'm on call, because he wakes up every 20 to 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And so it'd be me like invalidating his pain, trying to help him see how depleted I was.
Well, then I would start feeling defensive and go, oh, so that must be so hard to go to the beach for 3 hours with your baby in the middle of the day. That must be so hard to sit next to a sleeping baby for 2 hours while you have the ability to sleep there. That's got to be so hard to call on FaceTime your relatives. It's like, so I'm hearing all the things she's doing. I'm like, that sounds great. And we both have this like grass is greener.
And we both have epic days.
Yeah.
And we both have really hard days.
Exactly. And there are pros and cons to each side of it. Yeah. But when you're feeling such a great level of pain and deficit, it's hard not to like throw grenades at the other person.
Yeah.
In those moments where I'm expecting you to soothe or give me compassion for my pain, and you're expecting me to give you soothing and compassion for your pain, and we don't have it.
And anytime you are stuck in that pit, which like I'd say we're pretty much out of it. We still feel it sometimes, but we're out of the cycle and that loop of feeling like
it's easier to identify it.
I need you to validate my life and the things that are hard for me, and I need you to be compassionate. Like, we're out of that cycle. But anytime you're feeling that, like, you're longing for the other person to comfort you, bring you compassion, validate you, that is an indicator that you need to be bringing comfort and compassion to yourself.
Yeah. And here's what I would say too is like, you know, we go, well, wasn't that God's job? You know, shouldn't we be bringing that to God? And I hear a lot of Christians that say that, and then they go read the Bible, or they go like, you know, worship or get in, you know, in his presence, however they know how. And it's like, what about the seasons when you're like, you feel so disconnected from yourself that you can't even connect with him? Like, I think anybody listening to this will know that there's moments where it's like, why can't I connect to God? Why does he feel so far away? And it's not because he is, it's because usually you're far away from yourself.
Yeah.
We have a God that is ever compassionate, close, and living within us, right? So he could not be closer. It says in scripture, he's skin of our skin, flesh of our flesh, bone with our bone. Like, we are actually tethered to him. We're one with him. And that's a part of what Jesus paid for. That love is fully accessible. So why don't we feel it all the time? Usually it's because we're the ones that have some sort of block or guard and stiff arm against it. We're
the gatekeeper of our own heart.
Yes.
So if we're disconnected from ourselves, we don't have anything to connect to with God.
Right.
It's really important to facilitate like being connected to you, being aware of what you're feeling, what's going on inside of you, what you need, because then once you have that sense of like self-connection already happening when you connect in with God, there's somewhere for like the water to get poured into.
Yeah.
Right? It's like a lot of us go to connection with God, but we have a cup with a hole in it, and he's pouring in, and we're like, why don't I feel close? Why don't I feel connected? Why can't I hear your voice? And it's like, well, we're disconnected from ourselves. Yeah. So everything is spilling out.
It's kind of like the woman at the well. You know, it's like, if you'd come to me, then you would have never thirst again.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, okay, so we have all these water sources. I think a lot of us, we go, okay, if I just need my gym workout, and if I get my workout, I'll be okay the rest of the day. Or I just need my, my 10 minutes of meditation at this point, or I just need and what if those things are stripped from you in different seasons? Well, there's got to be another way for your heart to get its needs met. And I think at our core, we're still looking for a mommy or a daddy in different areas, like a mom or a dad, to love us in the ways that we didn't fully receive it in the times we most needed it when we were children.
And this is a subconscious thing that drives our entire life, whether you believe it or not, whether you know it or not. Yeah, it's like we're still looking for that perfect unconditional love because it's a God-shaped hole in our heart that I believe he put there so that he could fulfill it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when we're saying like, oh, give yourself compassion, it's like, no, take ownership that that's something you get within yourself. It's a partnership between you and God where we go, oh, it's my ability to recognize his goodness as a father, to recognize that he's given me all love and everything that I need inside of myself. And actually I can mirror him, just like the second commandment, love others as you love yourself. That there's something that happens when we receive love from God where we love ourselves too. And that builds our capacity to love other people. And I think what a lot of people do is they rush to dismissing deficits instead of being fulfilled in deficits. Mm-hmm. And they think that is what is selfless living that God's calling us to. And that's not true. Selfless living that God's calling us to is being so full that you have everything to give away and you're not in deficit anymore. Jesus frequently got alone with the Father, often, while there were people that were still sick, while there were people that still had needs. He never responded actually to people's needs. He always responded to his own compassion. He was moved with compassion. Now that's important for us to recognize because I think there's a people pleasing that has entered into the church that when you grow in responsibility, it will burn you out because that people pleasing will lead you into a place where you're like, I have to please everybody. And we almost enter into a savior complex where we end up trampling our own hearts to save everybody else from their own deficits. And then we end up burnt out. And then we end up resentful and bitter.
And if we take that picture of that heart issue, like those deficits, those needs that are longing to be met in different ways, and you point that away from the church into family,
sure.
Now you see why there are so many ministers, pastors, people out there that are doing all of this ministry in the church and neglecting their own family.
Yeah.
And I feel like in family, you come to the end of yourself so quickly. In intimate relationships, you're so much more exposed. And I think because of that, it's so normal for shame to come up, avoidance to come up, people wanting to hide, withdraw, run away, we freeze, we shut down. Like those are all trauma responses. And the only time we like run into those protectors is when we have a lot of care and a lot of love too. It's like the closer we are, the more is at stake. You know, like the more intimate our connection is, the more afraid I am of losing that connection.
Or being punished by the person you love most.
Yeah. It can show up in so many different ways. All I have is language for what I've seen in our relationship.
Sure.
But it can come out in so many different ways. But I feel like we come to the end of ourselves so much faster in really intimate relationships and we have bigger reactions. It's like, for those of you who are dating, I'm sure that you've noticed you maybe start dating somebody, things are going really, really well. You're like, man, I feel like I could marry this person. And then a couple weeks in or a couple months in, all of a sudden,
big trigger happens or
a
something.
huge trigger happens and they're dead to you.
Yeah.
You run away, you shut down, they become the villain or the enemy to you. It's like you were letting them into a deep and intimate place in your heart and it terrified you or it terrified them. And that's why they shut down and run away. You know, so if we look at like the family unit, I feel like there's so much dysfunction because we don't know how to take ownership for our needs. We don't know how to take care of our heart. We're so afraid of what we're feeling. We're so afraid of being punished. We're so afraid of love being withdrawn. We're so afraid of not being enough, not reaching their expectation. Like if you boil it back down to your childhood and you look at the themes that happened of how you felt in your relationships with mom and dad, those are probably some of the similar emotional experiences you're having in marriage.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to maintain a high level of connection, especially in hard seasons. But I feel like that's been the really beautiful part of this last almost 2 years for us is like, it's probably, I mean, it's hard to compare hards. It really is. Like we went through some really hard seasons in the first, like, I don't know, 6 months into our marriage until year 3 was a lot of hard stuff that we faced, just working out.
Marriage triggered so much for both of us.
Yeah. Like working out the kinks in our connection and like learning how to be seen by each other, learning how to let each other and learning how to work through conflict. Yeah. Learning how to bring in compassion and comfort. And this has been a different kind of hard where it's like that love is there. Our level of connection sits so much higher than it did before having a baby.
Yep.
And we have so much more security, but we also don't have as much control over our circumstances.
Yeah.
And it feels harder to control getting our needs met and getting filled up, which...
And on top of all that too, we don't have parents or family in town to help with family, like with baby needs and things like that.
Right.
Community pain.
And we have an assistant who helps out with him mostly whenever I'm working or like we'll take him here and there. But I am like hesitant to him getting too much time with someone that's not family because I don't want him to get too attached, you know? So it's not that we don't have any help, but I just don't utilize as much help when it comes to like watching Wilder because I feel protective.
How is it going to be a forever relationship?
Yeah, it's
totally
basically not. And so it's not that we don't have any help, but we also don't have a lot of support. And so it's definitely been a really hard season, but I have really loved getting to see like, wow, we're actually so secure. Like, and it hasn't felt like a threat to our marriage. And there's nothing that feels really high stakes. And even though we have gone weeks and months with like scraps and crumbs of connection, we still have an ability to be full and like bring love to each other in the ways that we can because of the ways we've learned how to work through conflict. Yeah.
Well, I think it's just like, it grows your capacity, you know?
Yeah.
I think we grow in our capacity and everything. It's like, okay, you speak in front of 10 people might make you nervous, but then you go to speak in front of like 1,000 people and you're like, oh geez, this is super scary and it's hard. And there's like a new capacity you have to stretch to. And it's like, I think that's kind of how everything is in our lives. You know, like you watch basketball players that play different levels and it's like, oh, they're wearing the pressure in new ways. It's like you're kind of growing into your shoes. I feel like it's been that way with marriage. It's been that way with having a child. It's going to be that way with more children and business. Like, okay, my capacity to do more business things. We are constantly growing into, new things, but it requires more from us. And I feel like that capacity comes with some of those difficult trials. It builds perseverance. You know, it's like, it talks about that in scripture, like count it joy, you encounter various trials. And at the end of all of it produces perseverance.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the beautiful part too, about having the perspective and mindset around growth, because just in general, even though this season is hard, I don't feel like we're victims to it. We're not being powerless about it. I can recognize and own when I'm feeling powerless, like when I have a powerless trigger, whenever I have a trapped trigger, and I can own and validate those emotions and hold space for it. But it's the beautiful part about having the perspective of like, I want this to shape me.
Yeah.
I want this to refine me. I want this to wedge me in like deeper into the presence of God. Like I want this to make me a more loving wife. I don't want to just have an excuse to not love and serve my husband well.
Right.
I want to actually lean into what does it look like to love him well, even though I'm at the end of myself. What does it look like to choose into intimacy with God, even though I feel like I can't think and I don't have any capacity?
Yeah.
You know, and it's something that I was thinking about this season too, is I could have a valid excuse to not choose into having sex consistently with you.
Yes. I'm so glad you don't.
Because, and if I look at like, we literally both just tried to get Wilder back down for his nap.
Yeah.
But if I look at the reality of even my like 2-hour like nap time, which is it's a break for most moms. For me, I am on edge because in a 20 to 40 minute period, he could wake up and I could either A, have to go get him back down again, which sometimes only takes 3 minutes, or B, what just happened is I was in there for 20 minutes and he still didn't go back down.
Right.
Or sometimes it's 20 minutes and then he has sprawled out on top of me and I don't have a way to get out without waking him up.
Right.
And then if I let him wake up, then the rest of the day he's more grumpy, more cranky. Like it perpetuates. And then that's the same thing for the evenings too. So like there are a lot of nights where I feel like, yes, I have enough capacity and enough desire to want to have sex, but the baby just went down. I'm hungry. I need to shower, whatever. And now I'm on a 30-minute timer of when I'm going to have to run in the room and get the baby back down again.
And what margins have we had before that moment to even have connection?
Emotional connection that primes me to want to have sex.
Yeah.
You know, so I could have I've had a lot of reason and like validity to why it's been so difficult, because my nervous system is always on edge because I basically never get a break.
Right.
And I know that's the same for so many of you moms, whether your baby naps and sleeps great or not. It's like there's so much need for you and such a limited amount of capacity that you have. But if I constantly let my feelings of wanting to just rest, of wanting to not have sex, of wanting to just watch a show, if I let my feelings dictate my actions, then I would have a very disconnected marriage.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't look like, okay, just shove the fact that you're exhausted, you don't want to have sex, and you don't have capacity, and have it anyways. That isn't the case.
It's giving up the right for it to lead your life.
Right. So it's a dance, though, of like, okay, it's in my heart to love my husband. It's in my heart to have a connected marriage. It's in my heart that we thrive. And I recognize that sexuality is something that my husband needs, but I do too, in order for us to feel united and connected to the capacity that God designed it to.
And we're reminded every time we do.
Yes. And every time we do, most of the time, actually, there's been a lot of times postpartum that like...
Partly joking, 90% true.
There have been a lot of times postpartum that like things internally don't feel good or don't feel the same, or I'm too tired to get turned on.
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of moments that it's like, it's not as enjoyable as it once was. But there are more times than not where 5, 10, 15 minutes in, I'm like, oh yeah, this is why I need this. Like my heart actually needs this to feel connected to my husband. My heart needs this to soften towards him and to actually let him in emotionally. And like this supercharges our connection.
Yeah.
And so a lot of this season, especially in the last 6 months, and I really want to make this clear for you mamas out there, but I know that this is good for anybody. It is so important to not let your feelings and your emotions dictate your actions. Because if I let my emotions and my feelings dictate the decisions that I made, we would be very, very, very disconnected.
Yeah.
Like our connection would be non-existent, because there's something about motherhood for me, and I'm guessing this is the case for most of you women, where my child consumes me, and he consumes my affections, my thoughts, my desires, my energy, everything. I want to give it all to the baby. And I recognize that the baby is so vulnerable and incapable of getting any of his needs met, but my husband is capable of getting his needs met. And so there's been a shift, and I've had to actually be disciplined in the way that I love my husband, because I'm so committed to having a healthy, connected, thriving marriage. And there's this saying, like, emotions are like kids. You don't want them driving the car, but you don't want them to be in the trunk either. Like, they have to have a place in your life. It's important to bring in compassion, to validate them. Like, let yourself rest if that's what you need. Let yourself say no and have boundaries if that's what you need. But you can't let it be a cop-out and an excuse.
Yeah.
Because if you keep choosing that, your momentary like feeling and action will dictate what happens long term.
Well,
can I just finish this thought really quick?
Sure.
Part of discipline is actually like feeling a certain way, but knowing that you have a different vision. So making your decision based on what you want in the future.
Yeah. Healthy discipline protects vision for sure. I'd say, you feel a strong why, then you're like, oh, I wake up excited to do this thing.
Yeah.
Like right now, I'm like, it's not discipline for me to work out every day. I'm like, gosh, I'm thriving on how my body's changing, where I want to go, what it's doing for me, the athleticism I want. I'm like, but a lot of people are like, man, you're so disciplined. Well, I don't feel that way. Mm-hmm. It's because I'm so connected to vision and the reward. And I think that's what this is too, is like building a case for discipline. And we need that, because discipline is, what do I want more than what do I want now?
Yeah.
Right. So it's deciding, what do I want more than I want now? And what you want now is usually based on feelings. It's based on urges, based on impulse. And we have to carry those things and go, why am I feeling these things? Explore them with curiosity, not just abide by them.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the best things you can do in marriage too, is like, okay, I'd say what we've grown strong at is being okay when we're not okay, and being okay when you're not okay.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, okay, learning, you might be at the end of yourself. How can I still be okay?
Yeah.
I'm at the end of myself. How can you still be okay?
It's like, how can we internally get these needs met with ourselves and with God? And then it actually makes space for us to be able to be a gift to each other. But there's so much that is like, okay, whatever I sow in right now in our marriage and in our connection is what I'm going to reap later. Whatever I sow in, even when I think about like the way that I'm like choosing to discipline Wilder, the way that I discipline him and what I'm sowing in now, I'm going to reap later. So there are moments where he like pours out a gallon of water on the floor from our water filter 10 times a day. And there are moments where I'm like, oh, everything inside of me wants to have some kind of timeout, spanking, some form of punishment that I feel this impulse to want to do. And in a moment, I'm like, actually, that type of discipline, like that type of behavioristic parenting isn't what I want to sow into him, because I know I'm going to be reaping later on a child that feels loved when he has the right behaviors and feels like love is withdrawn when he has the bad behaviors.
Insecure attachment.
And so I do the thing, even though I don't feel like doing it in the moment, which is I'm going to take a breath and I'm going to compassionately redirect him, show him why we don't touch that, why we don't get water on the floor, and then give him an activity that he can do.
Yeah.
Even if I have to do that 100 times a day, that's the level of devotion I have. That's the kind of discipline I'm having with myself, even though I don't feel like doing that because of what I want to reap. And it's the same thing in marriage and what I'm choosing in with intimacy and connection. It's the same thing in my relationship with God.
Well, I mean,
like,
he demonstrated it. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross. And we're like, whoa. And then we go, oh, but God is an angry God that killed his firstborn, is like his oldest son. It's like, no, the Father and Jesus were one. And it's like, when you look at his nail-scarred hands, you see the Father and him were in one, reconciled the world to himself, right? Mm-hmm. And I think Jesus shows us a clear picture for why he did hard things. And it's because there was a love and a joy that he was doing it for. And it was a connection that he was doing it for. And I think we have to connect to that within ourselves. But at the same time, we have to recognize those moments where, oh, Jesus did escape to be with the Father. He was willing to lay aside responsibility, call it that, or calling or whatever, to be full at all times. And I think we're learning that. And, you know, we have to learn. I think one of the best things we've learned is how to like healthily commiserate together, where it's like our needs aren't being met. They probably won't be for the next week. I'm so sorry. Like, but being with each other, like, well, that compassion is actually all your heart really needs at its core. Instead
of like the, you know, invalidating each other's pain or looking for our pain to be validated. We've both just learned like, oh, you didn't sleep. Oh, you woke up earlier than me. Oh, you had a stressful day at work. Like, I'm so sorry. That sounds so hard. Like, oh, you had a really hard, you know, and there are moments where I'm like, oh, you had a hard hour with Wilder. I had him for 10, you know? Yeah. But instead just being like, I'm so sorry. That was so hard. We're learning to
see each other differently, because it's like, mine feels so tired too, because I have to go into lots of strategy and thought life with work with a very tired brain. And it's just very different stuff. So it's like, it's learning how to appreciate the differences of the pain that we feel. Yeah. That's tethering us together, I think, in the season.
And not compare them at all. It's like, no, I have pain and you have pain too.
And it's both valid.
My pain matters and yours does too. Yeah. Yep. And if we can break everything else other than like, I'm so sorry that you're struggling. Like, me too. I'm in it with you.
And really avoid the temptation of going like, gosh, can you just be a little more positive? Can you get the stuff together? It's like really avoiding trying to step into the coach mode and just going like, okay, if I have a moment where I have capacity to lean into prayer or, you know, believing God for something or moving into healthy belief systems, owning that for yourself, and letting somebody be in pain if that's where they're at and they're not wanting to change. There are plenty of moments where I'm like, I don't need you to coach me, or you don't need me to coach you. Yeah. And it actually causes more of a wedge when it's like, no, you will arrive there on your own. Yeah. As you get what your heart needs.
It's honestly like, it's so healing, like getting to just be with someone in the hard and not be a victim to it, not be powerless to it, but like hold each other's hand through it and figure out like what kind of connection can we have right now while things are so difficult. And again, like a big factor of that for me is like, okay, instead of the times when I'd love to turn off and watch a TV show, like what does it look like for me to just like put worship on and sit with God and be with him and ask him like, what does your love look like today? What does your grace look like today? Like, even though I feel like too depleted in moments to want to do that, it's been a lifesaver for me in this season being like, nope, no social media, nope, no TV. No, I'm just going to sit in the presence of God because of what I know it's going to produce in me later on. And so if you guys are out there and you are in a hard season, I just want you to know that you are not alone. Yeah. Like we've had so much hard, and so much hard that's like, doesn't feel like it's getting better kind of hard, no matter what we try. And I'm also used to being really powerful and working my way through things and getting to the other side and feeling like I could cultivate this life where I was always thriving. And I don't know how to do that for the last almost 2 years now. I don't know how to thrive. And maybe I am thriving. Maybe that's what this is. I'm not sure.
Could be worse.
But it's been hard. It's been lonely. It's felt powerless. I've felt trapped in moments, and it's been beautiful and sweet and intimate. And I feel like I'm going through revival, and I feel like I can feel the presence of God in a way that I haven't in a long time in the hard. And so I just want you to like hold on to hope that like you can get through this. And the more you lean into taking ownership for your heart and lean into connection, lean into vulnerability and work through the pain, like through the pain is the only way out of the pain. Yeah. But like, it's not always going to be this way. Not for us, not for you. But I hope that this was helpful for you guys. I hope it is encouraging, even though maybe it's like, well, a bunch of Debbie Downers over here.
I don't think that's what it is. I don't feel that way about it.
No, I don't either. But, for those of you who have a hard time holding space for hard things, or you are someone wanting to be a parent and you feel so afraid of the parents that complain or the parents that go through hard times, or feeling like
I'm just going to cling to faith, like they just don't have enough faith.
I too thought I would do parenthood very different than it's been so far.
We are also big faith people, and it's very hard when you go through big disappointment in the midst of faith. And I think learning how to navigate disappointment is just as necessary as learning to believe higher. Yeah.
But you're not alone out there. We're with you. Our hearts are with you. We're praying for us. We're praying for you. And we love you all.
Yep. Love you guys.
If this was helpful, then please leave us a rating and a review. Share it with a friend. It is the jam for us when you post it on social media. If you ever link it, like that supports us so much because we grow organically here. Yeah. And if you're hearing some of this and you're like, man, I don't know what it looks like to connect with God. I don't know how to work through pain. I don't know what you're talking about when you're talking about not blaming or doing self-compassion. If that feels confusing to you and you want a resource where you can learn how to get connected to yourself, how to grow in self-awareness, how to work through pain and disappointment and grow in your connection with God, we have a link down below for our Come Alive course. Yeah. It is cheaper than it's ever been. Yeah. But that is a laid out process for you of how to get emotionally healthy and connected to God.
There you go. Love you guys. We'll see you on the next episode.
Bye.
Later.